And
being recorded.
Can you confirm that you can see my screen?
We can, yes.
Yep.
All right. Awesome. So thank you everybody for coming, and Peter, thanks for inviting me to tell my saga. It is quite the saga that Boeing has been on for a while, and I'm guessing that you will hear some things that are very similar to what you might have experienced yourself. So let's dive in. First of all, just a little bit about me. I am a software engineer, graduated from University of Minnesota with a bachelor's in computer science. And I have now had a 36-year career at Boeing, where I didn't update my slide. I am also an SPCT and SAFE Fellow with Scaled Agile. So I have a lot of background in large scale Agile transformations, and not just in the software world. I started at Boeing right out of college. And it's a great company to work for because there are so many different things that you can do within the same company. And so I have, continued to evolve my career working in different areas. But the one program that is near and dear to my heart that you may see in a picture behind me is the F-22 program. And that's where I originally brought Agile into Boeing. And it was also my first experience with waterfall, because when I came into this program, I was working on the software for the cockpit displays, and I was handed a document, and I was told, here's what the displays should look like. Here's your requirements. And so I was going through that document, and I was trying to create my code, and I had a question about one of the displays that I had to code up. So I went to the author of the document and I asked them about it, and they explained it to me, but they said, oh, and by the way, that display doesn't even exist in the next version of the cockpit displays. And yet I had to code it. So hence started my frustration with waterfall, because they had finished that document almost a year before we even started thinking about coding up the displays. And then I moved on a little bit into the pilot training organization, and we were actually prototyping and doing some learning about what needed to be on the displays. And at that point, what we were doing was we were thinking around the displays. About every 6 months to 9 months, we would bring in a set of pilots to come evaluate the displays and give us feedback on it. And we'd actually sit them down in a simulator so that they could play with it. It wasn't just a document, it was a real simulator that they could give us that live feedback with. And I kind of felt like that was better. That felt better. It was a better way of working. I actually got to, talk to the users of the system and make sure that what we did worked for them. And in about 2006, one of my managers, I was in his office and I saw this presentation on Agile software engineering. And I said, what is that? And he said, well, it's something about productivity and building software better. So I went home over the Thanksgiving weekend and researched it and brought it back to my team the following Monday. And I said, hey guys, I learned about this thing called Scrum. Do you want to try it? And they were willing and gave me thumbs up. And that is the beginning of the tale of Agile at Boeing. I think we were one of the very first teams that actually utilized the approach. So, 5 years after the manifesto gets signed, we finally caught up. So picture a large 105-year-old manufacturing company that has a long history with learning and implementing lean in the factory. And in fact, I believe everyone in engineering, kind of went through this total quality management approach that came out in like the 1990s. And then in about 2007, right about the same time that we were introducing Agile in the company, there was this new initiative called Lean Plus. And now we were supposed to take everything that the factory had learned about Lean and implement it everywhere across the company. And, there was a lot of effort put into the rollout. However, it really didn't feel right because there was all these manufacturing type of words being used for what we do in the office, and especially in the area of software development. It just didn't feel right. Like the production line, what do you mean the production line of software? There is no such thing. And when it was rolled out, it became kind of like a manager incentivized, do a lean project, show your improvements, and then forget about it, because then you're done, you're lean. Woohoo. And it was a push. It was a mandatory initiative, but it really wasn't accepted as an integral way of working. So, in some cases, if we think about what makes a successful transformation, it had great sponsorship from senior leadership, but because it was a push, I think that's the kind of the reason why it failed and wasn't successful. And we've learned some of these stories with our BBSSH learnings, right? Large agile transformations don't work, especially when they're a push. So we started with Agile software about the same time. And at that time in history, and maybe still a little bit today, Boeing didn't value software engineering. I shared my learning about using Agile with my software team, though, and we quickly saw improvements of how we were working together. So I launched a community of practice, and we found other places in Boeing where they were experimenting with Agile as well. And so we all connected together, and we got support from the software engineering function in the Boeing Defense Systems business unit, and got together with about 36 people and really started creating initiative around Agile for software teams. And so Boeing was really big on processes, right? If you don't have it documented as a process and you go into a government contract, you can't really prove that you're following your process. So what did we call our Agile initiative? The Boeing Agile Software Process. And we implemented it that way. And we really didn't bring in the concept of the mindset, the values, the principles. Why are we doing this? It was, here's a new process that we're going to use for building software. Go do that. And so really it was just Scrum. You can kind of see in the picture there, it kind of looks like a Scrum cycle. We added the product visioning and the roadmap, and down to the daily. We added a few roles because we felt like we needed a technical owner in there, and some other things from an engineering perspective. But it was really seen as a technical practice, only needed to be learned by software engineers. And by about 2008, we had enough pilots that we had experienced this with that they said, okay, we're good. Let's do a big rollout. So what did we do? We did a big rollout campaign. You can see in the upper right corner there, we had books, we had posters, we had badge extenders, we did videos, we had a website. There's a lot of good things there. I still walk around some offices at Boeing and I can see some of those posters on the wall. So it's kind of funny to see that that campaign, people just don't take things off the wall, is all I can say. And And we were given targets to roll it out to all of the software engineering organizations. Do you hear some of the anti-patterns here? Kind of learning as we went. So because because Boeing didn't see themselves as a software company or value software, we kind of did stealth Agile behind the mask of that Lean Plus initiative. So the Lean Plus initiative was getting a lot of support. Agile wasn't. We mapped Agile to the Lean Plus principles and said, look, we meet the intent of it. And so, you know, that kind of helped us a little bit, but we were masking it. People didn't realize that Agile was the thing that we were doing. So on my team on the F-22 program, we were using this on the pilot training system. And I presented my team's success story in 2008, both at an internal software conference and a Lean Plus conference. And then in 2009, we actually achieved a first-time quality delivery of the F-22 training system to Langley Air Force Base. And we were able to share that success of Agile on a large program of record, which really gave Agile creds within the company. You know, it was more than just IT. It was something that we did, and that was actually a physical hardware installation as well. I can't say that the hardware was actually done in an Agile manner, but at least the software and all of the work around it did. So this helped us get out from behind the Lean Plus and Stealth Agile, but there were still some challenges. And so we continued to drive the adoption of Agile to meet our targets. We brought in the technical practices as well so that we could start doing some continuous integration and continuous delivery. And but there wasn't really an acknowledgement of the kind of transformational change that would need to be required. So the business practices, how we got on contract, none of that really had changed at that point. And managers and leaders didn't see this as something that they needed to learn. So we still had big upfront requirements in design. The technical practices weren't added until about 2011. And just for another sense of craziness, because we were in Boeing Defense, our IT organization implemented their own Agile framework because, you know, of course, we couldn't both use the same Agile framework because they're IT and we're Boeing Defense, right? So, so unfortunately, we still had a dichotomy there. But in 2011, the team that was kind of leading this initiative received a Boeing Replication Award for showing that they could take that same process and apply it across a diverse set of programs. And we gathered metrics, and the metrics that we collected demonstrated improved productivity and quality and throughput and cost savings or cost avoidance at different levels and in different product and organizational contexts. So here we did share some of the IT successes as well. By 2012, we had deployed the Agile process to 60% of the BDS software teams. But besides the measures mentioned above, we hadn't really looked at how well they were doing or how broadly they had applied Agile. I mean, if we went into an organization and we taught one team Agile, we considered them transformed. Well, the question started being asked. So in 2013, we developed a maturity metric, right? Let's see how we're doing. And it was really process-based. Are you doing the process? So it still didn't have anything to do with outcomes and measuring outcomes. And, you know, it had been challenging to gather some of those metrics that made sense since all the programs were off with different approaches and for tracking productivity and quality. So we were trying to come up with some consistent metrics. I think can you please all check your mutes?
Yeah, so,
Abdo, can you please mute? Or Peter, can you mute?
yeah,
Thank you.
I got it.
Okay, it was a little challenging to talk over that.
Just trying to
So on my program, I continue to innovate with our Agile approach, learning from other government programs, connecting to industry teams that were starting to use Agile outside of software, because I really felt from the very beginning that if we didn't address the entire value stream, that we weren't going to be successful. And had that systems thinking approach. We had to make a lot of changes to make the advances that we did. We adjusted our product architecture to allow for smaller incremental changes. We automated our build process and taught our software engineers how to manage their own software configuration and taking the dreaded build team out of the picture. And eventually we were even able to provide our users with previews of what we were working on to get their feedback before we finalized the product. And then the last thing that was really wow is we pulled our systems engineering team into Agile and then eventually had them embedded in every single Agile team. And that was where we got some really cool cost improvements because we took the big upfront design and requirements out of it and really made it more of an incremental approach. The maturity metric that we had, it was really we were talking about people from the how were they doing the practices, like were you doing a daily stand-up, how long was your iteration, things like that. We checked them against technical practices, and those were probably the two measures that we had. And it was just on a scale of maybe 1 to 3. So we were starting to trend. People were starting to trend in the positive direction. And that's, of course, what they wanted to see. And then what happened? Dun, dun, dun. We entered the Agile Dark Ages, or what I call the Agile Dark Ages. So, you know, be careful what you measure, because those measurements that we had showed that we had 85% of the programs transformed to Agile. Maturity metrics were on the rise. So surely we had proven that Agile was a valuable process for software. And our VP agreed with us. He said, yep, you've got it. It's embedded in our culture. We don't need to fund this initiative anymore. Yeah, and so we entered the dark ages. We had a few core team members stay. At one point in time, we had 25 coaches that were supporting organizations across the company. They were told that whatever organization they were coaching needed to start paying for them. And it was really hard to be a dedicated coach when you had to go find your own funding. So a lot of people just gave that up and took other permanent jobs. So we dropped most of the staff. There were about 3 or 4 people left. They were brought into the Lean Plus organization, which was still going strong and still funded. And we just really kind of lost that momentum. We had a 2-day in-person training class that we were using that got reduced to a pre-recorded 1-hour class and a 3-hour instructor-led virtual class. So, I mean, we were just kind of backsliding everywhere, and it never really got into the Agile was the default way of working. Instead, we started to fall back into the traditional approach. So as one of the leaders in utilizing and showing the benefits of Agile, my program continued to scale, so I didn't stop. In 2015, the folks at Scaled Agile started to learn how Agile could be used for systems engineering and hardware development, and kind of adopted a scaling pattern around that for larger organizations, which was heavily influenced by the F-22 team, which was not just Boeing, but Lockheed. So it was a partnership between Boeing and Lockheed. So we first learned how to scale across 100 people, and then expanded it to include our mission systems teams of about 400. And then later we moved up to about 1,000 people that were all the people that were working on upgrades to the F-22 itself, not just the training system. And that still continues today. So the F-22 program is maybe not being as successful as they would like to be, but they still continue to use a large-scale Agile approach for their product updates, as it were, not necessarily in the sustainment of the aircraft itself. So I'm very proud of that program to still continue through that, even though there have been challenges as well. So when the funding from the software engineering function waned, I decided to go back to grassroots. And I started another community of practice and just called it the Lean Agile, Scaled Lean Agile community of practice. And because I had a large program and we were utilizing Agile across most of the value stream, I was able to speak and be heard about the credibility of Agile. There were some other Agile software communities of practice out there. They'd become inactive, and my community quickly grew. So I had 100 members after the first week and 1,000 before the end of the first year. So I could tell there was still an appetite for Agile in the company, but we still didn't get the leaders on board and understanding that. So in 2016, we turned 100, and I think there was some realization there that oh my gosh, we need to modernize, we need to go digital, we need to do a lot of things to keep this company going for another 100 years or more, as it were. And so, as with many other companies these days, we embarked on digital transformation, which internally to Boeing we called the second century enterprise systems. And it was led by our CIO, Ted Colbert, at the time, who was just recently announced as the CEO of our Boeing Global Services. So he's taking his agility through the company, which is good, because it's always good to have a C-suite person supportive of the approach. And at the time, they brought in an external company called Pivotal Labs. And we developed this lab environment, which we called our digital transformation environment, which was the first new attempt at Agile. So I have to give them creds for doing that. And having like a learning place is really good. So you could bring people in, teach them how to do extreme programming. They were kind of more focused on Kanban and extreme programming with that immersive experience. They set up this whole environment where they brought in food for the morning. You know, it was really the cultural change that needed to happen. The sad thing is that it only happened in the lab when you were there. And then once you were through the lab and you had your learning, yay, you get to go back to your home organization, which is still operating the same way that it did before. So yay and boo. And at the same time, and this was global. We had 4 different lab locations that were set up, and it was all great until we got to scale and realized that this lab approach didn't have a scaling recommendation. Well, they just said, hey, Pivotal scaled to about 250 people at one point in time. Let's just follow that. And some of those of us who had been using SAFe for a while said, not really. Let's go SAFe. And so in 2017, I was actually asked to come in to the digital transformation program that was doing all of the infrastructure replacement and implement SAFe for them. When I came in, I thought they already had the Agile culture. I thought they already had the executive sponsorship because it was in the vision and the mission. It wasn't in the leaders or the organization. So it was like, yeah, I finally get to do a large Agile transformation where we have great leadership support, which slowly degraded over time. So I did document this story. I shared this story in 2019 at the SAFe Summit that's still out there and recorded. So if you want to hear my tale about supersizing SAFe, it's out there. And at that time we had in this program, we had over 2,000 people, probably close to 3,000 people, all under 18 Agile release trains. And we had a great number of coaches so this was the one place where they actually took my recommendation for the number of coaches that we would need to make the transformation stick. They were all consultants for the most part. And so that was, not as good as I would have wanted to. My vision had been to pair a Boeing coach with a consultant coach to get the knowledge and then slowly roll the consultant coaches off or to a different area. That didn't quite happen either. But we did some improvements there, right? We got alignment across the portfolio. Some teams were able to run faster than others, which would be expected. And about the same time, we had a Boeing aircraft program that wanted to build a plane and use a different approach for building a plane. And they thought that SAFe would be a good starting point for them. So the product had a lot of complexity. Boeing's family of aircraft are based on a diffuse architecture. And we tend to, take our previous airplane and tweak it for the new one, which in the end would limit the total impact of agility. And it was really challenging to change the mindset of a bunch of engineers that are building physical systems. At one point I was teaching a class to about 80 of the engineers and they almost all stood up and walked out of the room on me because most of the training materials that we have were based on software. And so they didn't see the applicability of it. They had scoped out that they would have been 33 Agile release trains had they gone to full scale with that program. So that would have been supersizing the supersized SAFe. The good thing about these two programs is that they were both visible to the ExCo. And this is where we finally got the visibility up to the senior leadership of the company that Agile was a thing and that these two large programs were operating using Agile. So good story, bad story, that's what came out. The result was that after about 18 months of working on the second century effort, I finally got them to take the model that I had implemented within second century and allow me to create that at the enterprise level. So we established the Boeing Enterprise Agile Center of Excellence. Be Agile was intentional as our name because we wanted to get back to the fact that it was a mindset and that we wanted to be agile. So we got that established. We had a big showcase where we connected with all of our Agile network around the world in 18 hours, a very exhausting 18 hours. And really just, tried to work through some of those anti-patterns that I had seen, that others had seen as we had been implementing Agile, at that time over a number of years. Now, this was great. And then I don't want to say dark ages, but any of you who have seen the news recently about Boeing know that we have some product challenges. And that hit at about the same time that we launched the Center of Excellence. And guess who they assigned to lead that effort? My vice president that was helping me with sponsorship. And so, so we kind of lost a little bit of our enterprise sponsorship, and granted, the company had better things to focus on. But we just kept going. So I have a bias for action, and I like to keep going. And that's what we have. So this is my graphic of the Boeing story that I've told you so far. Now we're a couple more years down the road. We're seeing some good things going on. The interesting thing is that the Boeing Enterprise Agile Center of Excellence is no longer at the enterprise. It is homed within the Boeing Global Services business unit, because the organization that I was in basically dissolved. There is no enterprise level sponsorship anymore. I'm trying to get back up to that, to say, okay, even if we live in this business unit, we need some kind of enterprise sponsorship and funding. But we're still kind of working on that. So you can see I even call out the Agile Dark Ages, and I am very transparent with our leaders about why that happened and why I won't give them the kind of metrics that they had before. I really plan on implementing the BVSSH metrics going forward, because I think that having the value in the center of there and showing the outcomes is the critical piece that we were missing before. We really didn't show the outcomes, the cost savings, the cost avoidance, or any of that. Yes, and yes, I should retire, but I want to see this to be set up for sustainability before I leave the company. So I may be here for a long time, but but I keep saying as long as I'm having fun, it's okay. So let me tell you that we have a few limiting factors that are left, and these are things that we're trying to address in the Center of Excellence. So first of all, the lack of advancement in Agile due to leadership level competency. We really need, when we implemented it as a process and we said, software engineers, this is what you need to go do, we lost that transformation concept, that this really is a business transformation that we need to embark on. And our leaders need to understand it first, more than anyone else. The lack of available Agile coaches and instructors. I had an army at Second Century, and then the 737 MAX issue, and then COVID, and all of a sudden we're getting rid of all of our contractors, and we're laying off people that have been with the company for only a year, which was a lot of the new coaches that we had brought on. So we're still trying to build up that competency internally, knowing that we can't afford the consultants forever, right? It was great when we had them in some ways, but in other ways, the consultants came in without understanding the context of the organization, and kind of did a, this is safe, do safe as this, rather than what's your context, what do you need? So we need to do that. Lack of general competency around Agile and Lean, and that has a lot to do with the dark ages and the fact that a lot of new programs came in and there just really wasn't any training available for people. Agile implemented only in software is another huge one that we're trying to address. Dedicated Agile teams. I had one organization that showed me their Agile teams, and this one team had 10 people on it, and not one of them was dedicated more than 25% to that team. I'm like, you just can't make it happen that way. It just doesn't work. This project-based mindset. So, we do projects. We don't have products. And in a lot of cases in our government contracts, it's the fact that we still continue to use the traditional contracting method as well. Our default is always to traditional ways of working. There's no concept that that we need to do something different. And I'm not saying that's everywhere, but it's in a lot of places. And so these are the challenges that the Center of Excellence is taking on. So our focus going forward includes the concept of achieving business agility, but not just for the sake of being agile, because we know that agile is not the goal. If COVID has taught us one thing, it's that even the best plans can be made unachievable, and sometimes the environment changes so quickly that you throw the plan out the door. So how quickly can we adapt in these kinds of environments, and how can we deliberately design and improve culture, which is something we usually find challenging to describe or even see. We know companies like Tesla, SpaceX, Google, Amazon, they grew up in the digital age and they're able to move quickly and respond to change. So how do you achieve that same native agility in a company that's 105 years old now? What we're, let me go back. We're working on a coaching culture, people driving the enterprise direction, Agile integrated as a standard way of working with supported business processes, not just fit into the square peg of existing business processes. Teams and organizations that are incentivized for outcomes with full stack teams and orgs. Leadership behaviors and compensations to support growing teams and collaboration, and then measuring flow across the entire value stream. So it'll be easy. We'll be done like by the end of this year, or not. So I brought up the concept of being agile versus doing agile. We developed some basic agile training within Boeing. We utilized Gil Broza's Agile for Non-Software Teams concepts because we really wanted to make sure that we were addressing the full audience within Boeing, not just software. And so we're like making sure that we're trying to make sure that everybody in our organization gets at least the basic agile mindset, values, principles training, and then that they understand that there are multiple practices that they can use as well. Get them to understand that we really need to change the system of work along with bringing in Agile. I had one leader tell me that every organization that he'd gone into that had implemented Agile increased their costs. And I asked him if they had transformed their business processes at the same time as they brought in Agile. And he kind of looked at me like deer in the headlights. What do you mean? But there's just this assumption that, well, if I bring in Agile, I can reduce my timeline and I can reduce my costs because, yeah, it's faster, better, cheaper. So we really want to focus on outcomes, have leaders go first, focus on the how, and empower the why. You might have heard a few of those statements from the patterns and principles out of BVSSH. So leadership development is another one that we're really trying to focus on in our leaders go first. And get them to recognize they have a role in the transformation and that they also have to change. I know that when we were getting approval on F-22 to implement Agile holistically across the program, we got the executives together, both from Lockheed, Boeing, and the government, and we put up a slide that said everyone's job will change, and had all of the names of all of the roles up there, and I think that was really powerful for us to be able to get that agreement with them and get them to understand they needed to be a part of it. So we talk about two different things where we really need to get our leaders to understand the language of Agile, the terminology that we're using, and also figure out what are those habits that they need to work on. What is a vision? I know I've talked to so many leaders about their vision. And in fact, just earlier today, we were talking with one of the leaders about what is his vision for this certain product. And he said, I can't believe nobody knows that. I like said it. I said it with all my leaders. And I said, how many times did you say it? And who got that message? And where is it? Like, could I go to a page and see that? So he was a little disappointed that it hadn't taken flight, just because he said it once or twice. Getting that coaching concept in there for leaders as well, and get leaders to understand that they need to shift from command and control to coaching their organization. What about the word collaborate? Does anybody really know how to implement a collaborative work environment, and what you need to enable, what you need to teach teams to be able to do that? The continuous improvement, I saw that in the chat. That needs to become ingrained in how we work and recognize that we're never done. Having that vulnerability to bring your whole self and to share that with your teams, and having empathy. I remember early in my Agile days, and my husband will probably say I still do it very often, complain about the managers, those managers and leaders, they just don't know what they're doing. And now today I have empathy because they weren't trained in this way. They were trained and they became successful and got their positions because of the traditional way of working. So we need to bring empathy for them, but we also need to help them get the knowledge that they need. What about commander's intent? Do they understand what that really means and how they can work that in their organization? Psychological safety is so critical to building the trust within the teams and the organizations, and it doesn't come by itself. So that's something that needs to be worked on. And there is something that Boeing is doing about that. We have a huge campaign that started late last year called Seek, Speak, and Listen. And it's really about diversity and inclusion and creating that psychological safety. I'm a little afraid of it because it's a mandate that came out and it's being imposed on people, but I think that people are seeing the value of it and making it into something that that can be extra valuable, and it can pair up with an Agile transformation really easily. Do we have safe to fail areas of our work where we can experiment, where we can come up with a hypothesis rather than thinking that we have to know the solution from the very beginning, and bringing in that experimental approach and understanding what it means to iterate on something. It's not rework, and that's a big change. And then get leaders to understand how they can work together as a cohort, both in their learning and in being coached and in how they work together. Because when leaders all go operate as individuals, then we have the same silos and lack of alignment that we had before. We have a big focus on people. We cannot go with an Agile team where nobody's dedicated to that team and the work on that team. So we want to make sure that we get teams together, we create true Agile teams, and we get leaders that enable those Agile teams to work together, and we teach them the techniques that they need to use. As there's a lot of soft skills that people just don't have. Like, you know, do you know how to make a decision as a team without going to a manager and asking for a manager's support? Can you do that? Can you solve a problem within the team as long as you don't, you know, get into HR boundaries? Can you solve that together as a team? But we need to teach people these techniques because a lot of them don't know it. And then bringing in the concept of customer centricity, you know, making sure that it's not just the Boeing standard and the Boeing way, but we're doing things that our customers want, and that getting feedback from customers and making sure that the product is aligned with what they're thinking is a good thing. Because traditionally it's, did we meet spec? And I've seen a product that met spec but didn't meet expectations go down the drain. So, so we have to, and that might have been the Boeing's Joint Strike Fighter that really looked ugly, and the pilots didn't like the look of it, and therefore it got shot down. So did you test any of this with your customer? And then truly team of Agile teams, organizing Agile teams around the delivery of value and making sure that they can achieve their outcomes. And that gets into value stream management. Are we looking across the entire value stream when we're organizing our teams, when we're looking at work? You know, in the factory, we do that. We have, you can see everything on the factory floor as it moves from one end to the other, but in knowledge work areas, we don't have that. I am starting to see a lot more leaders do value stream mapping as they're reorganizing, which I think is encouraging. So, you know, hopefully we'll get to this. And then, you know, looking at all the digital tools and making sure that our digital tools are connected together so the data can flow as well. And so that we can have that rapid learning by looking at the data that's there and have it be factual. Other tools that we're using, we definitely brought in the Cynefin framework to start using as a sense-making tool to get people to understand the difference between complicated and complex, and why you might need to use one technique over another, depending on the area that you're in. Learning when to embrace variability versus attempting to control it. So, you know, if I have a repetitive task that I'm going to do over and over and over again, then I want to control variability there. But if I'm doing unique work, if I'm innovating, or at Boeing, what we call non-recurring work, then I need to embrace variability and allow for that, creating a work system that includes buffers so that we have some buffer management. And we've been throwing around some concepts from theory of constraints and critical chain program management, knowing that when we build a physical product, that in a lot of cases there is an order to the building of the physical product that has to come in that probably doesn't come out of a simple backlog prioritization method. So looking for ways to manage those together. And of course, we've got a lot of focus on DevOps and DevSecOps within our software organizations. And we did bring in, software is finally a thing at Boeing and accepted, because we now have a VP of software engineering and a focus on creating software factory as well. And so that's a really good sign that us software weenies may actually be accepted in the company now. And then Agile has now been identified as a critical enterprise skill. So at the end of last year, we got a new chief learning officer. Unfortunately, I just heard today he's leaving the company for personal reasons, but sad. But he brought in this concept of, hey, we have these critical enterprise skills that we need to hop on and learn right away. So I actually have an organization within learning and development that's helping me develop the training materials that go along with learning to be agile. And they just finished their first module. And you'll see my digital badge posted on LinkedIn. So, because we're also doing digital badging for that. So other ones, we're looking at data, we're looking at lean, and I'm sure that others will come up along the way. The concept here is kind of like there's this red thread of knowledge that needs to happen everywhere at Boeing, whereas we used to teach these things functionally, like, this functional skill needs this functional skill needs this. What we're saying is everybody in the company needs these skills. So these are the red threads that weave our knowledge together and enable us as a company to move into that the next stage of digital and transformation. And getting this integrated and aligned with other initiatives, I think, is really important. We tend to get these senior leaders in different business units coming up with different initiatives or different functions. And so then you have this quality thing in your supply chain, and you have a quality thing somewhere else, and you have to map the two together. So I'm thinking back to my story about Lean Plus and Agile and how we had to map it out and show that it was doing exactly the same thing. And we've also started to identify Boeing designated experts, which is a qualification within Boeing when somebody is recognized for their skills in that particular area. And we're working to bring Agile into the technical fellowship as well, of which I achieved last year. And my specialty area is not a hardcore engineering area, it is lean agile product development. So I think I'm one of the first in the company to bring that up to the tech fellow level, and we'll continue to try and move up. There are 5 levels of technical fellow within the company. So what we just want to do is we want to get it ingrained in the culture. Unlike what my VP thought back, 15 years ago that we were done, we're not done, and we need to continue. And these are ways that I'm trying to get it into using the existing constructs, but also saying, we have to relook at all of the processes that we're using for product development. And I'm starting to get people to listen to me, but the enterprise standard gated process will be the death of me. If I can get that to go away, I think I'll retire then. So I'm sure that some of this resonated with you, and I saw in the chat. I hope one thing has become clear, and it is that concept of never giving up and continually improving. Best practices are only best until somebody comes up with better. And with the rapid change of technology, that's usually very fast. So where will we be in another 15 years? I don't know. I hope I'm not still here, but I hope I'm still hearing the story. And I think that if we stay on our current path, I think we'll be successful. And I'm excited at the stage that we are. I know we have a long way to go to get back from some of the challenges from COVID and the MAX. I'm starting to see some real positive changes in the company. And I just hope that we can continue on that path and become the company again that we were before, but to be industry leaders in this area, not trying to catch up. So if you can take away one thing from what I've shared, it's that you have to use your own critical thinking to find your own path and understanding of complexity and context. Don't just copy what someone else has done, and be relentless in your pursuit for better. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Debbie. That was awesome. That's a great talk.
Thank you. I'm always glad to share my story. Don't do what I did. It's kind of the story I'm given here. But we always know there's challenges, and you just have to continue to try and overcome them.
We are at the top of the hour. I don't know if you have time for any questions, Debbie. I know it's a little early for you, but
I do. I can stay for a few. Anyone who has any questions?
Hi, Debbie. John Allen. I do have one question. In your experience, what is the cause of the bias toward traditional non-agile ways of working? And what's the best way to counter it in a way that sticks?
Well, I think because we've always done it that way, it's so hard in such a large company where you've got your processes or your policies are numbered in the hundreds or thousands by now, right? How do you go affect that kind of a change? And in addition, I don't see that people have gone out and been curious to get the knowledge about what else is going on in the industry. What are other people doing? So really, I've just been trying to increase the awareness. And the biggest thing that I always hear is, where else have we done this in Boeing? And I'm like, okay, I get it. We don't want to be the first, but do we want to be the last one to try this? I mean, so I'm kind of like trying to encourage people, maybe scare them a little bit with stories. And, I'm connected with folks at Lockheed and Northrop and other companies that are doing well with Agile. And I just try and find their stories too. And I share those with my leaders to say, I don't want to scare you, but, I think we lost contract X because of this story that was, shown at Northrop or whoever. And I've even heard my leaders say things about, hey, our customer came back to us and they said, we're not as fast as some of these other companies, and the quality is kind of not there either. So it's kind of a little bit of, hey, this is really exciting. Don't you want to be on the leading edge of it? To, hey, aren't you scared about where we are today? And just try and pull those two storylines together.
Thanks. That's been a little bit of my experience as well, in that comfortable people don't tend to improve. And by showing the pain points, it's a good motivational tactic. I wish there were a better one.
Yeah, and I'm definitely in the invite over inflict mode right now, in that if I go out to a leader and I'm just not sensing that they're ready, my team will back off. We'll say, you know what, we would love to engage with you. Here's our minimum requirements. And when you're ready, then we'll come back. So.
Yeah, thanks.
You had a question, Marcus?
I do. Thanks, Peter. Fantastic presentation. Thank you, Debbie. Just an amazing inspirational story of determination. My question pertains to incentives. You touched on incentives, and I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that in terms of how important you think that is for changing behaviour now, and anything you might have done differently in relation to performance and rewards to support behaviour change.
We've mucked with the system enough to know that that it needs to be changed. So when we have teams that are supposed to be collaborating together and yet they have their own individual performance initiatives that are laid out, it makes it really challenging. And I had one lady that was like, hey, I put this on my goals for the year and it never made it onto the backlog, and therefore I got rated lower. And so then we started putting things on their performance review about collaborating together and participating on a team. And so in those areas, we started to shift, but we were still on this annual performance review concept. And now we've started to shift to more quarterly, where you're supposed to just have conversations with your managers. But they still haven't really blended that into the compensation model yet. So we have a ways to go on that. For the leaders though, so the leaders get scored on, how well their business unit does from the performance of the products and the sales and everything, right? Do they get scored on how many employees they keep? What's the turnover rate? How are those employees, improving? I think to the story about Turn the Ship Around, where Marquet said, he had this many leaders that got promotions and things like that. So I think we need to add that into the manager and executive level incentives. And I think that will help. So this is me thinking and telling you stories about what I've heard from other people, but I just think that until we get away from having performance based on our business units or whatever division that we're in from a leadership perspective, that we're stuck,
Great, thank you.
Is it Maru?
Yeah, Debbie, awesome stuff. Really appreciate the straightforwardness and the humility. My question relates to language. So I wonder if in the course of your, let's call it adventure, a pioneering adventure at Boeing, did you learn or observe any tactics pertaining to language? I'm not going towards coaching or anything. It can go in any direction. Language and its use that either combine very well with the agile mindset, lean agile product development, or your own dealing with the challenges that are particular to your adventure at Boeing.
I haven't really been able to achieve that yet. I know that in my own organization and those programs where I was coaching, I would be very intentional about following up with leaders after I heard them say something in a meeting that I felt like, oh, that was not good, but not calling them out like in the middle of the meeting while they're talking to everyone, unless I felt like something was really damaging was going on. But just to follow up and say, when you said this, and the room went silent, here's something that I would recommend, so I would it was one-on-one coaching with leaders from that perspective. And in some cases, yes, I would use powerful questions to get them to realize that they did it versus calling them on the floor and saying, you know what, you just took the whole team down when you said that. So, just not to try and take them down, but to have the empathy, to bring them in along the way. And right now I'm working with the leadership portion of the learning and development organization, and really just trying to weave some of these Agile concepts into the stuff that they're already teaching leaders, because they're so close that I figure, you know, some of those words that I had up on that leadership slide, if I could get them to incorporate just those terms into what they're teaching leaders, then I think we'd be off on a good start.
With regard to your own experience dealing with fear, with refusal to change or change resistance, let's call it this way, or, you know, classic calculations, what's in it for me? I'm an engineer. This is all software, trivial stuff. You know, all those barriers. And did language help in any way, or did you see any tools from linguistics or cognitive sciences or coaching that were
I
of
think
help?
yeah, part of it was coaching. That group that almost walked out on me in that one class that I was teaching, the only thing that really helped there was getting their senior manager to come in and give them the why they were in the class, because that had not been communicated. And so we almost said that, you know what, we're not going to start a class anymore until the senior leader comes into the class and explains to them all why they're there. So we kind of made that a little bit of a standard practice when we were doing it specifically for one program. Since COVID, we've kind of gone to this virtual enterprise level training where the classes may not be specific to one program. So it's a little bit harder to sense these days what's going on. But no, I don't have any good answers there. Tell me what you learn. Help me. Wayne?
Well, I think in some respects, the word agile has many people view it as the latest buzzword. And so in some situations, it may not be the appropriate way to talk about it. I loved your story. I mean, your story really is what the value is. And you don't give yourself enough credit. As Jonathan Smart talks about, impediments are in our way and we have to get around them. And certainly you've done that. We teach a course at University of Pennsylvania on developing an agile leader in the organization. And, you know, and our focus is not in the technical area. We focus on HR and marketing business because we believe, which has probably been tougher than you know, that all functions can deal with this. And we spend a lot of time talking about change and different frameworks of change. And I was curious, I would assume Boeing has a large change function, or maybe it doesn't. Were they able to help you? Not that they're very effective anyway, but it seems like, you know, I was just curious, were there any kind of change initiatives focused on this that were helpful, offered, or maybe not?
Let's go with the maybe not. So I did take the introductory change management class from our HR organization last year, and was absolutely frustrated with it because it was plan a project, you know. So we've been kind of following the Cotter model, and he just came out with a new book recently called Change, which he adds some principles into it and some additional areas of focus that I'm still working on. And really, I'm still trying to figure out, you know, how do I even get these leaders into an opportunity where they're ready to learn. You know, I mean, the first thing you say is, okay, I want to send you to a class. Oh, I don't have time for that. It's a 2-day class. Can you do it in an hour? No. So we have basically said, apply agility to agility. Our change management approach is that you need to come up with this list of things that you want to work on. We'll manage it on a backlog. But I think that what we have not done ourselves a service with is we haven't had leaders in those laces to help drive the transformational change. And so flipping the concept or adding the concept of a leader-led LACE is kind of where we're going right now. And I have one organization that I was ready to do that with at the end of last year, and then they disbanded that organization and moved, it was the training systems, and they moved all the training systems in under the platforms. So now they're not really an organization, and I don't know if a LACE will work for them. So
Maybe they're just afraid to work with you because every time they work with you, something gets canceled. Not your fault, not your fault, but it seems like a recurring pattern here. So,
okay.
no, just kidding. No, just kidding. You got to do what you got to do, and I admire you for that. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's definitely been a journey, and while frustrating, and I feel like I have a flat forehead from beating my head against the wall a lot. It was a more fun part of my career than just being a software engineer on one program, because I really got to get out and see more areas of Boeing, more products that are getting built. And that just really helped me grow, I think, as well. So it was fun.
Awesome. Thank you very much again, Debbie. That was wonderful. And thanks everyone for all the questions and the good conversation. So yeah. Thank you. And we'll see you all again next time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thanks, Debbie. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.